When looking at your favourite horror movies, there's a strong likelihood that the main villain of the piece is a truly sinister presence who takes great pleasure in doing heinous things. But in this race to be the most messed up SOB in the modern age, and FYI by that I mean since 2010, who comes out on top? Well, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 most twisted characters in modern horror movies. Number 10. Chris Cleek, The Woman. From Lucky McKee, The Woman is a tough watch at times, and that is all largely down to Chris Cleek and his sinister ways. Having spotted a feral woman while he was out hunting, Chris returns the following day to knock out and capture his latest prey. Tying the woman up in his family's cellar, the Cleek patriarch intends to quote-unquote civilize his captive by using some truly chilling measures. To run through Chris's many misdemeanors, he gets things off to a grim start by scrubbing her down with boiling hot water and then pressure washing her clean. That's merely the troubling tip of the iceberg though, as the woman shows the head of the Cleek family raping and beating his hostage, verbally and physically abusing his wife and daughters, possibly sexually assaulting and impregnating his eldest daughter, and his grim habits all influence his son to very much follow in his dad's footsteps. Going even higher on the WTF scale though, it's eventually revealed how Chris Cleek has an eyeless third daughter called Socket who has been raised like a literal dog. Thankfully, Chris gets his definitely just comeuppance by having his heart ripped out and eaten during the woman's final act. Number 9. Oliver, Who's Watching Oliver. For Oliver, he is an extremely ill fella who struggles to stop himself from doing some truly heinous things. In one of the better genre performances in recent memory, Russell Jeffrey Banks is phenomenal as the titular character in Richie Moore's Who's Watching Oliver. Sadly, the movie seemed to go under the radar upon its initial release, but seeing the film recently added to Shudder should bring more eyes to this disturbing character study. An awkward loner who lives by a strict regime of repetition, Oliver is also a serial killer. Unlike so many other famed killers of cinema though, one thing that makes Oliver stand out is how he's desperately trying to break his cycle of murder. Unfortunately though, all these habits are down to how he's been raised. A major mummy's boy, aren't all the nutters in horror though, it's Oliver's mother who encourages him to commit the horrors shown throughout Who's Watching Oliver. Having moved to Thailand though in an attempt to change his ways, Oliver is still stuck in the rut of bringing ladies back to his abode so that his ma can watch him torture these women via video call. Understandably, with this premise, when called for, Who's Watching Oliver delivers plenty of gruesome gore. But the film also doesn't rely on that to tell its story. Instead, that story is of Banks' character trying to grasp a shot at normalcy. Number 8. Kurt Kunkel, Spree. Spree is ostensibly a comedy horror at heart, however the film's humour only serves to make it more impressive that serial killer slash wannabe influencer Kurt Kunkel is as unhinged and twisted as he is. Sick of producing video content for an audience of zero, sorry pal, I can't relate, I have at least 2 people I know who actually likes the stuff I make, Kurt figures out a genius plan of how to finally rake in the hits. That is, to become a real-life serial killer. Live streaming his crime spree while picking up victims in his rideshare taxi service, Kurt sets out one night and eventually racks up the infamy he's so desperately wanted. While he's not a physically intimidating presence, it's how desensitized and sociopathic Kurt is throughout that's so twisted. We're constantly reminded that he is, or was, just a regular kid, who became so warped that he'd happily butcher a young YouTube star on camera if it meant that he got a few likes. So, yeah, I suppose if you liked this video, please smash that subscribe button, guys. It really does help. Number 7. Michael Myers, Halloween. Now, hang on, before you jump into the comments, I know that unlike the vast majority of figures on this list, Michael Myers is clearly not a creation of this past decade, obviously. Still, the shape has had 2 silver screen outings in the past few years, both of which somewhat reinvented his character by wiping away decades worth of lore, and said pair of outings involved some ludicrously gnarly kills. Following 2018's Halloween, Michael is currently back in cinemas with Halloween Kills as I record this video. From there, Haddonfield's most infamous son will return to presumably cause more chaos and carnage in next year's supposed final franchise entry, Halloween Ends. And while it's only fair to not go into too much detail where it pertains to Halloween Kills just yet, let's just say that Michael Myers is very much at his most brutal and bloodthirsty in the second of David Gordon Green's trilogy. As for the 2018 movie, there we saw Michael breaking necks, smashing skulls, stabbing fools, and showcasing levels of swift violence rarely seen before in the prior 10 Halloween movies. Of course, like I said, the 2018 effort ignores all continuity by John Carpenter's 1978 original, but this first green-helmed Halloween even manages to top the gruesome gore of Rob Zombie's pair of pictures, as the shape was totally terrifying in that franchise recalibration as well. Number 6. Dr. Jim Sahendra, VHS 94. The most recent entry on this list, Dr. Jim Sahendra acts as the antagonist of The Subject, one of the most bonkers segments in anthology horror VHS 94. The first section of this story is dedicated entirely to this man, a brilliant scientist who's gone mad, kidnapped a bunch of people, and performed horrific experiments on them. With these experiments, he's attempted to create a new life form, a meld of man and machine. But not the cool sci-fi kind like Darth Vader or someone. Think more Tetsuo the Iron Man, or those weird zombie boys from the end of Resident Evil 8. Though we only see a few of these experiments, it's clear that Sahendra has lost every ounce of his humanity, treating the human body as nothing but meat and leaving his victims in a frightening liminal space between two states of being, not quite dead, not quite alive. Sorry, I just had to get that in there. He's eventually killed when the police find his lair, but he still has the last laugh, locking his killers in with these experiments, who break loose, of course, and then slaughter them one by one. Number 5. Ghoul, Sinister. What makes the Sinister franchise's Ghoul so twisted is, not only does he target children, but he corrupts these kiddos to the point that they end up murdering their entire family. And it's not just one child he's done this to, for this is something that Ghoul has done for numerous families over the decades. Before he ventured into the MCU with Doctor Strange, director Scott Derrickson brilliantly cut his teeth in horror with The Exorcism of Emily Rose and the aforementioned Sinister. While Emily Rose was a twisted movie in its own right, 2012 Sinister was disturbing in a whole new way. A pagan deity, Ghoul only exists for the reason of brutality, bloodily breaking up families, taking their souls, and crafting his own unit of young killers, seemingly just for a laugh. Clearly a spiteful sort, Mr. Boogie decided to embark on this sinister scheme after having his mouth sewed shut by his brother. Adding an extra element of eerie to Ghoul, though, is that he doesn't particularly get his own hands dirty. Instead, this creepy figure opts to have innocent youngsters do this dirty work for him. Number 4. Pennywise It. Tim Curry made for a great Pennywise back in the 1998 miniseries, but Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise the Dancing Clown took terror to an entirely new level. The headline act of Andy Muschietti's pair of It movies, Skarsgård freaked people out in a way rarely seen in modern horror. His body movements were twisted, the real-life party trick he could do with his eyeball brought an eerie authenticity, and the frantic, frenetic mood changes of this Pennywise was a total different proposition to the Pennywise seen in the 90s flick. Of course, before anyone jumps down my throat, that's not to say that Tim Curry's Pennywise wasn't great. I mean, it's Tim Curry's Pennywise. It's just that, with a bigger budget, modern effects, and less censorship, Skarsgård's was able to be more twisted, more brutal, and his vicious attacks given much more screen time. Where the It series was aired on TV, the restrictions that brings were not in place for Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise. For horror fans, that meant the director's pictures were able to be more faithful to Stephen King's source material, which led to a Pennywise who haunted the nightmares of all who saw him torment the Losers Club on the big screen. Number 3. Jack, the house that Jack built. It's foolish to ever expect roses and daisies going into a Lars von Trier film, but the house that Jack built is extreme even for this director. In near 3-hour dive into the life of a serial killer called Jack, the audience is treated, for lack of a better term, to the agonizing process of this nutter taking out his latest victims. As to be expected, the violence on display is so harrowing in its naturalism, often being treated in a shocking, matter-of-fact manner. This realism, though, is contrasted with the inside of Jack's head, as he warps the world around him to fit his grand biblical delusions. He's got a serious case of main character syndrome, and getting so intimately acquainted with his life and his mind is a freaky proposition for even the most die-hard horror hounds. Nobody in this movie is safe, especially women and children who the film gleefully shows being slaughtered and preserved, and you'll probably want a shower and a nice watch of a Pixar film once you've finished hanging around with Jack. Number 2. Doomhead 31. Phenomenally played by Richard Brake, who you've definitely seen in that one film. Oh, you know the one, it's on the tip of your tongue, you know, he's the guy from the film. 31's Doomhead is a thorough bastard of the highest order. And in this 2016 Rob Zombie movie, Doomhead is merely one of several such chilling sorts. See, set on Halloween 1976, Zombie's 7th film sees a bunch of carnival workers kidnapped and made to play the twisted game of 31. That game is an annual tradition put together by Father Napoleon Horatio Siler's murder, Sister dragon and sister serpent, with players having to survive several torturous rooms across a 12-hour span. Each of these rooms is protected by a nefarious head with murderous intentions, and the only way to win at 31 is to make it through the night until the 12-hour timer expires. It's every bit a kill or be killed scenario when faced with the heads, and the most vile of these rogues is Break's Doomhead. If 31 was a video game, Doomhead is the final boss. Once you think you've seen it all, it's Doomhead who's there to show you what a real battle looks like. Menacingly patrolling 31's final stage, Break's character gets to off a couple of our protagonists until he's just left with Sherry Moon Zombie's Charlie. Number 1. Art the Clown, Terrifier. Having first reared his sinister head in 2013's All Hallows Even anthology, Art the Clown got to fully take center stage 3 years later when Terrifier first hit the festival circuit. Now Art is the sort of horror character whose actions are so disgusting, his intentions so twisted, that you can genuinely struggle to find a usable screenshot or some footage of him for videos such as this. Seriously, so much of the footage of Art are of him committing actions that just can't be shown here, and I'm very sorry, but you're gonna have to seek it out for yourself for the most part. I can happily describe it to you though. For instance, there's a moment in Terrifier where Art saw some poor woman in half, with the audience shown all of this in graphic detail. Then there's him feeding on the face of another tragic victim, not to mention how we're first introduced to this horrific harlequin by him spreading his own crap on a bathroom wall. His second Terrifier picture was due to have been with us by now, but that has been hit hard by the global pandemic. As and when Art does resurface in Terrifier 2 though, expect to see plenty more messed up antics from one of horror's creepiest figures. So that's our list. Want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What did you think of these horror villains, and are there any exceptionally twisted ones that I missed off here? While you're down there as well, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to What Culture Horror for more lists like this every single day. Even if you don't know, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.